What's up everybody? Hope y'all are all doing well. My name's Anthony. On today's video, we're going to be talking about pruning fruit trees, why you need to do it, and some of the things that I've learned throughout the years of me actually doing this stuff. So stay tuned. That's right, today we're going to be talking all about pruning fruit trees. I want to go over three main points. Number one, why exactly do we prune? Number two, pruning techniques that I've used throughout the course of my time with fruit trees. And number three, I'm going to show you proof of concept because I'm going to show you how I like to prune my peach tree and one of my apple trees. All right, so let's jump right into it. Number one, why do we prune? Pretty simple. Pruning gives the tree a signal to produce more, okay? It's like a threatening signal to the tree that something might be happening to the tree. Maybe some damage just happened or it might be dying. So the tree likes to use that as a way to make more growth hormone to establish more support. So it's either going to branch out more or it's going to give you more fruit, because the fruit of a fruit tree is the way that the tree reproduces. All right, the seeds obviously are how trees reproduce. So when it produces fruit, it's producing seeds. So if you're pruning, especially pruning kind of heavy, then the tree thinks that something's wrong. It might be dying. So it's going to want to put a big giant flush of fruit out to make sure that it can carry on its next generation. So for this reason, you never want to prune more than 1/3 of the tree, because we're not trying to use all the energy from the roots. We're just trying to make the tree think that something's going on when really nothing is, and it's going to shock it to produce more. Alrighty, so what are some pruning techniques that you can use for your fruit trees? Pretty simple. There's two different styles that I like to use, either the open style or the central leader, okay? First, I'm going to talk about the open. This is an example of open being my peach tree. As you can see, I cut very early on in the tree. I cut it right here. That way it incorporates an open shape in the middle. As you see that, there's a reason for that. Because of my climate, it is very humid. When you have a very humid climate, especially down here in the southeast, you get things like a lot of fungal issues. Fungal issues are a death sentence to certain trees. So peach trees, very susceptible to things like brown rot. You want to make sure you avoid that at all costs. The best way to avoid that is to make sure you have sunlight hitting all the branches and airflow. So in order to do that, an open shape like this one is exactly what you want. So if you can prune it early enough, you want to make sure that you're pruning it so you have that open area so the sun can get in, the wind can blow through, dry the dew every single morning from the leaves quickly, and you won't have to worry about many fungal issues. Now my apple tree right here is an example of a central leader, because you have one main stem that is the central leader and everything else kind of branches off that. So as you can see, there's the central leader, and everything kind of branches from that. The purpose of this is, yes, you do have fungal issues as well, just like you do with peaches, but it's not quite as bad with things like apples and pears, so you don't need to have very open shape. You can prune it if you want to an open, but if you have a central leader, it makes the branches a little bit stronger, because apples and peaches or apples and pears are usually a little bit heavier, so you want to make sure you have a better structure to hold fruit. And at this point, I want to make sure that I mention some trees don't need pruning at all, okay? Things like fig trees, they kind of grow from the ground, like a crown in the ground makes up all these different shoots. You can prune them if you want to, but they don't really need to be pruned because they just shoot up these random side shoots anyway. So with those kind of trees, you don't really have to do things. More or less, pruning is more relegated to things like your traditional fruits that you usually find in the grocery store. Right now I'm going to show you exactly how you're going to be wanting to prune these trees. I'm going to start with the open concept of this peach tree, okay? This thing's going to be opening up probably in the next week or so. It is February 18th, so yes, it is probably going to be open up soon because the weather's been getting kind of warmer. Obviously not today, hence the jacket, but it's been kind of trending warmer to the point where we're not really freezing at night anymore yet. Of course, we're going to get one or two more, but that's just another thing. But I'm going to show you exactly what you're going to want to take care of to try to get the most fruit production without having to worry about too much bushy growth and leaf growth. When you're pruning, you're going to need a standard set of loppers, cutters, whatever. I got this kind from Fiskars. They work very well. I also have some from Corona. These things do work as well, or work well as well. And then I also have a pair of diagonal cutters. I almost said it and we got this video a strike, but these are diagonal cutters. If you happen to work on cars, wiring, whatever, these also work very well for cutting off branches. The main ones I'm going to be focused on for this tree is anything that's pointing towards the center, because again, I want the sunlight to hit the middle. So if I have something wanting to shoot towards the center, I want to take care of those. I also want to take care of anything that may be crossing Okay, if you got two branches crossing, that's no good. You don't need that because again, it stops airflow. So you want to take one of those branches off. And finally, I want to make sure that any branches that may be shooting straight up, they're called water shoots, you want to take care of those as well, because we're not trying to get, as we're going to be basically growing nothing but leaves. You want to make sure you're trying to getting leaves and buds. And since peach trees especially produced the buds the year before, you're going to see the buds here, where the fruit's actually going to come from versus where the leaves are going to come from. So you should be able to tell which one's actually the water shoot, because you're not going to see any budding for blossoms. It'll be all leaf buds. All right, I got this one pretty low to the ground. Deer like to eat these as well. Not to mention, it doesn't look very healthy, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it. I'm not going to cut it very much against the base. I want to leave that little bit right here, and boom, that's all. We're also going to cut down here. And as you do this, you'll get much faster at it, and you don't have to think quite as much. But all we're doing is we're trying to get as much sunlight and airflow in the middle as we can and stop everything from crossing. See this guy right here? We have this whole big tree, and I got this tiny little branch down here. So I'm going to cut this one off as well. That way I can try to put more energy up top where I want it. And one more thing I want you to pay attention to is the angles of how these branches come out. If an angle of a tree branch is kind of perpendicular, like, you know, a 90 degree like this, then any kind of weight on this branch right here is going to snap that thing off. So if you can get anything less than, say, about a 70 degree, maybe even less than that, 45, then that's going to be a very strong angle to be able to hold some fruit load. So if you see something that doesn't quite have that upward angle and it's more right angle like that or here, go ahead and lop it off. See, here's a prime example of that 90 degree I was telling you about. If there's anything that grows on this, which doesn't look very healthy right here, but here it does, this right here is going to break under its own weight. So we're just going to lop it off so we don't have to worry about that problem. Now on to the apple tree. One thing we really want to pay attention to was last year's branches that may have carried too much weight. For me, I like to thin my fruit, but a lot of the stuff I was doing with this tree was I was trying to see exactly how much fruit I could get away with before I thinned. Okay, usually I like to leave 2, sometimes even 3, depending on how big the fruits are on the branch. That way I can see how it's going to handle the weight. And as you can tell with some of these, how they have permanent bows to them, how they've bent down. There was too much weight at the end of those branches, so the branches kind of curved down. So I know for this year to thin them out to 1 apple per those, you know, size branches. So you'll see as you do it, as you kind of grow these things, how much you need to thin to make sure you have the best production possible. So these that are, you know, permanently bent or curved downward, those are going off first. Here's a really good example of one of those little water shoots I was talking about, water spouts, whatever you want to call it. It's growing off from the side right here, from the, you know, kind of shallow at the bottom. But look at it, it's almost growing straight up. You definitely don't want that, so we're going to go ahead, cut it off. As you see here, we have a whole bunch of branches crossing each other. If these have any kind of weight to them, they're going to be laying on top of each other, which is going to trap moisture. Trapping moisture is going to make fungus. It's going to eventually kill the branch or the fruit, so you got to take care of that stuff. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut this one. There, now nothing's crossing right here, except no more crossing, exactly what we want. Another thing, all of the stuff that you cut, make sure you remove that. You don't want to leave it here because, again, it could potentially harbor disease. So take all the branches that you cut off and move them away, throw them somewhere else, dispose of them properly, because, again, you could infect your tree if you leave stuff on the ground rotting. One more hint I want to show you is you don't actually have to cut right at the base to where the stem actually intersects. You can actually cut the ends of the branches off. Just leave them at an angle so the water doesn't want to sit on them. You see how this one's going to be... You see how this one's going to be a little bit long, and if there's an apple at the end, it's going to probably break that branch. You're going to cut this branch right there. Someone's having fun. One more thing I forgot to mention. If you just planted a tree, if it's your first year, for me personally, I don't prune those. I let the first tree, the ones that I just put down, that first year, I let them just kind of grow wherever. Because basically all you're trying to do is you're trying to let them roots develop, not the top So if you start cutting the top right as you plant a tree, you're encouraging more upward growth and not root growth. You want to make sure that first year is growing mostly roots. You don't want to see too much stuff up top, because the more roots you have, the better that tree's going to survive. Okay, so that's going to wrap up this video. Hopefully it helps you learn at least why you need to make sure that you're doing some form of pruning. If you do not prune, I know a lot of people think that, hey, the more branches I have, the more fruit I'm going to have. That's not the case at all. You're going to get lower quality fruit. You're going to probably have more problems with pests and disease, and you want to make sure that that plant can actually hold the fruit, because it's gonna, if you have too much fruit on one branch and the branch isn't big enough, you're going to lose the branch and you're going to hurt the tree, especially during the growing season. If the branch kind of splits like this, all that open area is going to be room for, you know, pests and disease to get in, and you don't want to have your tree to have any kind of cankers or anything like that, because that could ultimately kill the tree. So the more you prune, I'm not saying you got to completely demolish the tree, but the more you prune off this little extra stuff, the healthier your tree is going to be, and ultimately the better fruit you're going to be having. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video. If you learned anything at all, please do me a humongous favor and give this video a thumbs up. I very much would appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you are not, and I will catch y'all later, okay? Bye. Hey, you're still here? Well, you know what, since you're still here, I'm going to go ahead and add one more little tidbit of advice. Whenever you have your shears, you want to make sure they stay sharp, but you want to make sure you're cleaning them in between the trees. You don't want to introduce one pathogen from one tree to another because you didn't clean your tools. So when you go from tree to tree, it's best to just bring like a Clorox wipe with you and wipe it off to make sure that you are not moving issues from one tree to another.